Zane is by far one of the most loved, but also one of the most hated characters amongst the Ninjago fandom. For an understandable reason, his quality of character has definitely been a more debatable aspect of him throughout the course of the years. He went from one of the best characters in all of Ninjago to easily one of the most divisive. Personally speaking, I've never taken a crazy issue with him. I've always understood the criticisms and I've talked about them on the channel before. But the thing is that I've never really looked at Zane as a completely irredeemable, can't come back type of character. But when Dragon's Rising came along and Zane was reintroduced, that belief honestly was tested, because he definitely did become potentially the worst version of himself when it does come to him on an overall scale. But it does seem to be that with the release of Season 4 Part 1, and of course spoilers for that season if you haven't seen it, it definitely feels like he's on the path for the right direction now. And that is going to be what we discuss today. We're going to take a look at Zane throughout the course of Dragon's Rising, talk about what potentially was his worst moments, talk about where they went wrong and how they seem to be on the right path, and what I hope for Zane in the future. It's a very interesting topic, and honestly I'm just glad that I'm making a video about Zane where I can actually be positive in the end. So let me not waste any more of your time, and let's talk about how Zane is actually becoming good now. Now, like I said, I want to be more specific when it does come to Zane's characterization in terms of Dragon's Rising, because it does feel like where it's the most relevant for this video. But I will say, what did make Zane initially endearing in the original run of Ninjago is the fact that for a Nindroid, he was human. He had emotion, he had expression, he had feelings, he had quirks, he had his own mannerisms that just made him feel so human, especially in comparison to others. He had this deep-seated compassion and love for everything that was around him. He adored nature, he embraced cooking, family, friends, everything that was around him, and he always lived by the phrase of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, and it led to the ultimate sacrifice and the ultimate demonstration of how he truly feels for the people around him. Zane ultimately let go of his own life because he truly loved the ninja, Wu, Garmadon, Nia, and of course, Pixel. But as time went on, those traits slowly went more into the background. They slowly felt faded and we got much less of them, especially come around the time of the 11-minute era. We did have blips of it, we did have some very sweet moments. I personally am a fan of Zane's emotionless arc in Crystallized. I don't think it was done perfectly, but I do think conceptually it was fairly interesting. It just had a lot of holes in it. But the thing is that Zane was definitely demonstrating a lot of moments that didn't really feel in line with the earlier version of him. And it's not like the sacrifice of Zane should have changed his feelings towards the people around him. The fact is that he just kind of lost those traits along the course of time. And it was a massive shame, but people never really took too much of a problem with it until the event of Dragon's Rising. Dragon's Rising had a generalized vibe of just making very good character improvements to all of the original ninja. Kai was a massive benefactor of Dragon's Rising, but all of them definitely did take that, and it did feel like initially that Zane maybe would have had that as well. In Season 1 Part 1 he was introduced towards the end, so we never really got a lot of him there, but in Season 1 Part 2 he does have some moments that really did feel interesting. We see him question whether or not he's still himself, whether or not he's still Zane, the Titanium Ninja. He enters into a competition about himself and he fails, and it does cause him some form of distress, which I do think was fairly interesting. He's also missing Pixel. He wanted the love of his life back, so it definitely felt like there was a setup for Zane to have this identity crisis, to have this missing Pixel art, and it would have been amazing to have seen, and I really do wish they expanded on it, but unfortunately they didn't. Come Season 2, Zane was just becoming a Nindroid. Zane was not becoming human. Zane wasn't expressing emotion. He wasn't talking like he used to. And ironically, that was his biggest fear that we found out in the 11-minute era, just being a robot. But the thing is that over the course of Season 2, he was just relaying identity, metric data, and statistics and facts. It was nothing of the sort. It was always algorithms and my scanners and all these little aspects of him that just didn't really feel like how Zane used to be. Zane used to be the fountain of knowledge, of course, but he used to demonstrate it in a very different way, and it just felt noticeable. And not only that, it just felt like he was also just not really being considered within Season 2. Season 2 Part 1, he has his side arc with Cole, which is decent, but there's a lot more emphasis on Cole during that arc. And in Season 2 Part 2, he's knocked out of the tournament very quickly. So it just feels like for the most part he was a background character that would relay information when the writers decided for it to be the case. But people actually did have their hopes up, because come the time of the promotion of Season 3, we were learning about what the season was going to entail, and a big aspect of it was the fact that it was advertised as a Zane season. There was a lot of talk of fixing Zane's character, making Zane human again, bringing back stakes to Ninjago, really homing in on what makes Zane who Zane is. And I for one was extremely excited by this, because Zane's stories are quite consistently good. But come the events of Season 3, and we just had so much of nothing. Zane had Pixel back, which was fine, but apart from a few small scenes, we never really got too much around that, and honestly, that was a massive shame. And the other major thing they really did, I guess, was do a fake out with him. Honestly, that was one of the most interesting things that they could have done, because they already knew that Ninjago fans were sick of this concept. But this really did feel like a major low point when it came to Zane. It really did feel like Zane just wasn't going anywhere. He felt flat. For his own season, it just felt like nothing. And not even the fact that it was just nothing. There were major contradictions to what we know about Zane. Zane, this quirky character that has done the weirdest things, but always for the right and for the cute reasons, was outright detesting it within this season. He talks about how dancing with animals is a weird behavior, and that's the last thing that Zane should say. That's the last thing I would expect from his mouth. And honestly, it was just kind of depressing. It felt like Zane was just kind of gone for the most part. It felt like we just didn't have the Zane that we knew all of this time. And I was getting worried, but I did have a glimmer of hope until Season 3 Part 2. When that season dropped and Zane was written out immediately, I felt dread. I felt like this character was officially done. I didn't know what to think anymore when it came to Zane. It was possibly one of the most depressing moments I've had in being a Ninjago fan. And it did exactly what it said. We never saw Zane once throughout the course of Season 3 Part 2 as soon as they writ him off. I was devastated, and I really didn't know what was going to be of this character beyond. Of course, it was implied he was coming back for Season 4, but I just didn't know what they were going to do, and I just was worried. But luckily, I was wrong, because come Season 4 we were reintroduced to Zane, and we were given a version of him that I just never expected. We were given a version of Zane that felt human. We were given a version of him that felt like we haven't had seasons worth of nothing. It felt like a version of Zane I would expect from years prior, and I was genuinely shocked, and I was wondering if it was just a flash in the pan. And we do actually know how this came to be in terms of in-universe, but it seems to be that out-of-universe they really did home in on what made Zane Zane, and I just can't wait to see what happens beyond this. Because like I said, when he comes back, we see him use interesting language, we see him find different ways of expressing himself. He uses terms that we would never have expected from Zane for a very long time, and I find that amazing. I like the fact that it seems to be that he's learning and adapting, exactly what I would expect from Zane. And it's not just that, like I said, he's picked up new hobbies. He's now learning to draw art to express his emotions, something that Season 2 Zane wouldn't even conceive of, something that I just wouldn't ever expect that kind of version of him to do. But he's writing, he's drawing, he's doing all of these things, he's teaching Lloyd to do it, and I love that. It feels like he's truly feeling human once more. He's also comforting the people around him. He's taking pride in actually helping the people in terms of their emotions, even as far as the Arc Dragon of life. Even then, when that Arc Dragon is feeling doubt in whether or not they'll be able to survive based on whether or not Lloyd will be able to complete the ritual, Zane comforts them. He takes solace and tells him that it's gonna be fine, tells him that everything will be okay and to hold on because Lloyd will come through for them. And the Archdragon quite literally states, for a robot, you are so interesting, so depthful, so emotional. And he says that, he does his best and he realizes that emotions are important. And I absolutely love that. It feels like a version of Zane that understands where he came from. If you can't tell, I absolutely adore all of this. Zane honestly just feels amazing in this season. I can't help but just love the fact that he really does feel like a human. And that feels weird to state because he's an android, but it really is the case. The fact that he can feel human when he is distinctly not is honestly such an amazing compliment to give, because that was the original intention of this character. So I just can't be any happier. There's only one downside to it though, and that's the fact of how it came to be. We get confirmation that Zane has learned how to do all of this, to express emotion, to draw art, to take pride in his own emotion through Pixel. Remember, when they left throughout the course of Season 3 Part 2, Zane states that during that time he learned so much from her, and that is how he's come to be the version he is now. And I'm very happy that this has been done. I'm very happy that regardless of how it's happened, it has happened. But the thing is that it does just make me think that in retrospect, that we really should have gotten so much more when it came to Season 3. The fact that all of this happened off camera is a massive shame. Imagine if this happened in Season 3 Part 1. Imagine if they actually focused in Zane on the Zane season and actually made these emotions come to be on screen itself. It would have been an amazing thing to see and definitely would have made the season 10 times better. But unfortunately, like I said, they didn't, and whilst that is just a massive shame, I'm just glad that canonically speaking that it did happen. It reminds me a lot of what Dragon's Rising did with Kai between the events of Crystallized and Seabound, how they retroactively fitted in how Kai coped with the loss of Nia. I honestly just keep getting reminded of that moment, and it's honestly kind of why I don't mind it, because whilst that does happen off screen and it's a shame, it still just serves overall to make the plot and the characters better. So I will take what I can and I will run with it, because at the end of the day, it made Zane so much better for the better. And that is why, on an overall, I think that Zane is on the right path now, and I honestly think that he could be considered once more to be an overall good character. He has gone from a character that felt lifeless, lacking in personality, to someone that actually has so much potential, and I just simply cannot wait to see more of. It really does feel good to say that Zane is on the right path. It feels great to feel like Zane could have so much more going forward. Honestly, I'm just really excited to see what they're cooking up, because it does seem to be that there's more in line when it does come to Zane, and I really cannot wait to see that. But this is where I want to pass it off to you guys. Are you happy with the course that Zane is on? Did you have problems with him before the season? Do you still not like him after the season? I would like to know what you're thinking, and just generally the vibe when it does come to Zane going onwards, because it does feel like there's something more here finally, and I just simply cannot wait. But thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people, and if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each and every single one of you, your support means the absolute world to me, and I cannot thank you enough. But of course, like always, that is about it for today, and take care. Okay, bye!